Looking for the best decks in Timeless Best of 3 on MTG Arena? Well, you stumbled on the right spot. We are doing the weekly metagame breakdown where we're looking at the best performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder for the Timeless Best of 3 format. We do Best of 1 as well from week to week, and we look to cover all kind of the trends. We do it for all the formats. We get the data predominantly from Untapped.gg, what you see on the screen, companion tool that runs alongside Arena's client, aggregates user win rates, gives us a whole bunch of cool stats. One thing to note, there was an alchemy release this week for Bloomburrow. While the cards themselves most likely will not have a relevancy in terms of the format, just from a power level perspective. From a data perspective, how Untapped works is when a new set releases, there's usually like a 3 to 5 day range where we're still trying to get the data. Tried to wait as much as possible to get this video out, to try to get past that, to get the most topical for the week. We're going to be looking about the last 2 weeks before the alchemy drop on Tuesday in terms of our range. It also just kind of messes us up for the day with the popularity of the decks. So we won't be doing that feature for this week. We'll be back for next week. But I will paste all these deck lists. If you want to use Untapped, link is in the video description, but we'll get started. We're going to be looking July 30th through to August 20th. So about a month's worth of data. And we're going to be looking at 7,300 games of matchup data. Highest win rate deck is Mardu Energy. Now there's two Mardu Energy variants. There's a Lurisk version and a Giganta version. I'll indicate it in the video by L or J in the name of the deck. This is a Lurisk version, 54 games, 83% win rate. So what you get with this splash of black in the deck is access to Orcish Bowmasters, helps more against like the control-y style decks, gives you another angle of attack against combo decks. It could punish them. Also gives you access to Juggernaut Peddler, another way to kind of punish the more mid-rangey decks. Thoughtseize style effect staple to a creature that you can rebuy with Lurrus, or with Cthulhian Nightmare as a way to kind of loop back some of your creatures. You make a lot of incidental tokens. You could get back a Johnny, Peddlers, Bowmasters, whatever it may be. Bombardments, like we've seen in Historic, kind of play into the deck. This version's on 3 Ragavan, full Oscillates, full Guides, Galvanic, Swords, and Static Prison. So a lot of interaction in the deck. And then just using the engine of a Johnny Goblin Bombardment to kind of kill your opponent. Huge amounts of damage out of nowhere. Sideboard, Deafening Silence for the show and tell matchup. Static Prison for just more removal, as well as Swords Plowshare, Disruptor Flute as another disruptive element. Peddler as a way to interact with your opponent in terms of just more Thoughtseize style effects. Sun Cleanser in here for the energy mirrors, and Licensors for Graveyard Hate. And the next sequential, so not a huge percentage difference, but we have the Mardu Energy, the Flage version. The Flage Giganta version. I had more fun with this version just because Omnixus is my favorite Planeswalker, and you can also copy the... So if the turn you get City's Blessing, you happen to then also trigger Omnixus, or if you have the Oscillate's Pride out, you get to make a copy of the token copy of Omnixus, so you could just have like multiple Omnixus going around. This puts a lot of pressure on the control decks that tend to not have as much Planeswalker removal, or if they have like sweepers, stuff like that. It also plays well into counter spells, since you oftentimes will be making 2 copies, so they would require 2 counter spells. Flage is also nice as just a recursive element. You're a little less explosive in terms of damage, but you'd still have like your Bowmasters, Amp Raptor package, fewer Goblin Bombardments in here, Static Prisons. I personally prefer Swords over Prison. I don't know. Like, while this helps you in game 1 against Show and Tell, I just find that Swords is a little bit more flexible, especially in the mirror if they're at times playing Sun Cleanser, but it could be right either way. I also like having at least a Lightning Bolt in the main. I was playing mine more proactive because if you have too much like interaction and your opponent's not playing any spells, you could sometimes whiff on the Raptor. In my version, I was only playing 2 Aether Hubs. While it's a necessity at times for Amped Raptor, it kind of messes up your mana at times and puts a little bit of pressure. I found that kind of configuration the best. You are softer to Blood Moon in these types of lists. However, there's not too much Blood Moon going around. Pithing Needles for activated abilities, Static Prisons, Surgical Extractions. For combo hate, you have Vexing Bauble in here. With the Bauble, notably, it does shut off your Amped Raptor's ability to cast stuff for free. But this is useful against like the Beans deck, against Show and Tell, stuff of that nature. Sun Cleanser for the mirrors, and then the Licensors for Graveyard Hate. We then go to Belcher, so 80% on this one. So this is a combo deck, leveraging Leyline for protection early against discard effects. You're basically looking to go Beseech on like a cheap artifact or whatever, use it to cast Ironcrag Feet, use the Belcher in hand, activate Win. You could get Channel, use Belcher, activate Win. You could do some combination of Dark Rituals into Belcher, activate it. And then the rest of the deck's just about finding your combo, protecting it. All your lands are module DFCs, so you technically never have lands, but so you could flip your entire deck and hit your opponent for that much damage. Pact of Negation is protection, Haywire Might for like needle effects, stuff like that. Same with Assassin's Trophies removal. Graveyard Hate, Path to Peril, Calling Ritual. Calling Ritual is really good into the energy meta. Basically, sweep their board and then get enough mana to activate Belcher the same turn. And then Grief, because you have so many miscellaneous black spells that are lands, you can easily Grief with this deck as well. We then go to Simic Eldrazi Show and Tell. So this is a deck that's combining the Show and Tell package with kind of a backdoor plan of playing Eldrazi. You use things like Ugin's Labyrinth to help you ramp ahead. You have Shifting Woodlands as another utility land, so the Woodlands could copy Omniscience, so it acts as almost like another Show and Tell from your graveyard. So you can do your Show and Tell lines, Show and Tell Omniscience, Bay of Wishes, get Mastermind, get a Bonds of Insight, get back your 2 Masterminds, cast Approach the Second Sun, get back the Approach the Second Sun. So you have those lines there. But then you also could just go like Show and Tell, here's an Emrakul, and this is a cast trigger off. Oh no, this is put into play. You could Omniscience and then cast this. These are all cast triggers, so notably. But still, at times, just throwing into play a big Eldrazi might be enough to kind of beat down your opponent. You have like Self-Mill that helps you find your copies of Shifting Woodlands. Also, Channel in this deck is another way to just pay a bunch of mana into a big creature. Full of Defense Grid to protect you against heavy counterspell decks. Test the Talents for the Mirror. Or Bonds of Insight's part of the combo. Force of Vigor, Artifact Enchantment Hate. You could play something like Crozen's Grip as well. In terms of the Mirror, I guess one with the Multiverse is to just an alternative. If they surgical your Omniscience, you have another kind of win condition in that respect. We then go to the more traditional Show and Tell. So this wasn't the next in terms of win rate. It was like 2 or 3 down, but I like showing them side by side so folks can compare. So this one's at 70%. So this one's more all in terms of the combo. This version here is not doing the high instant win. It's more of a control variant. So you have mana drains in here, just more setup protection effects. You can use Nexus of Fate to take a whole bunch of extra turns once you get Omniscience going. So you're playing into Omniscience, playing Atraxa, kind of winning that mana there, and then just surgically, or like Nexus of Fate taking all the turns. The one thing with this is if they like surgical your Atraxa, you have no other win conditions. So it is more of an all-in combo variant. They're like all-in combo control variant where you don't actually necessarily win that turn. It's non-deterministic. You could technically whiff on Nexus, but with enough card draw on the deck, you should theoretically find your copies of Nexus of Fate. Flusterstorm for storm matchups, or just like a lot of spells. Fragment is removal, Prismatic is removal, Surgical for kind of mirrors combo, Disputes in there as counters, and then Hullbreaker as an alternative win condition, good in terms of like heavy counterspell mirrors. Then go to 4-color Reanimator. So this is another deck that's looking to leverage kind of the reanimation package. It is an Esper variant that has Atraxa as its main target, using Tainted Indulgence, Psychic Frog as ways to kind of bounce, or sorry, like discard. You have Philagi as another way to discard. And then you try to get back Atraxa through Reanimate. You also have like your Evoke Elementals that you could Ephemerate or Reanimate back, so you get that value there. And then just some disruption in the deck, Treasure Cruise for card advantage as well. And sideboard, Grave Expectation, Graveyard Hate, as well as can be just steal cards from your opponent. Fluta's Disruption, Best Talents for like Show and Tell, Wrath of Skies is a sweeper that hits like Goblin Bombardment hits like pretty much everything except to flip the Johnny out of the Boros decks. Harbinger of the Seas as a like Blood Moon style effect lets you set up your draws and then lock them out. Leyline as a counter spell or against heavy kind of discard decks, Bowmaster, stuff like that. Elesh Norn and Sarah's Emissary as alternate kind of reanimation threats. Elesh Norn's pretty solid against the energy decks. Sarah's Emissary against maybe more linear creature decks or something like Belcher. You could name protection from artifacts that can't beat you that way there. I would probably see about just having space in this deck for Bowmasters. It just seems like another good card to kind of have. It's reasonable in the energy mirrors, just protecting your stuff, and it gives you like another threat just in terms of hitting your opponent. Then go to Dimir Tempo, 70%. So this is kind of the mid-rangey control deck. We've seen versions like Mistmans that just play Bowmaster as the primary win condition. This version's got Psychic Frog, it's got Bowmasters in there, it's got some Tamios, as well as Nethergoyf. So all kind of reasonable threats in the deck. Treasure Cruise for card advantage, Sweeper in Toxic Deluge, and then just a bunch of removal, disruption kind of elements of the deck. Bobble is basically free fodder for the escape effects of like Nethergoyf to get you some value there. You get like, you could discard Nethergoyf to Psychic Frog to get the value and then get it back kind of effect. Soul Guide Lantern for Graveyard Hate, just disruptive elements in terms of counters. Surgical for combo hate, Flute for disruption, Edict in here, another Sweeper, Graveyard, and then Meat Hookmaster is pretty solid against the energy decks. Sweeps their board, gains you a whole bunch of life, where normally in Dimir colors in these particular builds, there's not too many life gain mechanics to it. Then we go to the Beans deck. So 5-color control, they're calling it, 5-color elementals. This is a deck with a whole bunch of evoke elementals. You have Furies, Solitudes in there. What you're doing is with Cabaret Revels, when you cast these, you basically cascade into a smaller creature. So you'd hit like Nissa, Flage, Six, Felia kind of effects, or Omnath. You also have a Traxa on the top end, just with the ramp. This version's playing Settle to the Wilds as another ramp effect, letting you go from 3 to 5 mana and helping you find like Omnath or the One Ring or some effect like that. 6 lets you rebuy stuff from your graveyard. Leyline Binding as removal, up the Beanstalk for card advantage, then just a bunch of cheap interaction with that. So kind of proactive focused deck that can win with just big hitters, draw you a bunch of cards. This one's a Yorian version as well. Disruption or like protection from like blue-black stuff with Veiled, Veto as counters, Rest in Peace for Graveyard Hate, Purge for aggressive decks, and then Dispute as a counter spell. And then lastly, Boros Energy, 65%. So this is a Gengantha version. So a lot of the elements of the Mardu version, but playing Amulet over like the Bowmaster package. Fable Flage in here. Pretty much the same cards that we've seen, just a cleaner mana base in here. Does give you access to Blood Moon out of the side, which is useful against these Dimir decks, these multicolored decks, if they're not proactive in searching for basics. Graveyard Hate, the Sun Cleansers like we mentioned. Swords is more removal, Deafening Silence for show and tell. Needles, single Sun Cleanser. I'd probably play a second. Stone of Erich probably isn't as needed. There's not as much in terms, I guess it's not bad. If they evoke an elemental, it dies and gets exiled, so it's not terrible in that respect. But you could even just play like Bauble potentially as another alternative there to kind of get that similar effect. This card was heavily played when Yawgmoth was more prevalent, since it kind of shut off the death trigger combo elements of the Yawgmoth deck. So that's it for the week. Let me know what you think, what you've been enjoying in the format, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for watching.